Most of Week 6 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday night with an AFC West clash between the Broncos and Chiefs. The final score in this game was 19-8, and it was a very ugly game for Denver. And guys, we're 6 weeks into weekly recaps, and there's not much to say I have about Denver that either A, you already don't think, or B, you already haven't heard. The best case scenario for this team would be to truly bottom out and finish with the top 2 pick in the 2024 draft and go from there. It's been embarrassment after embarrassment over the past 2 years, and Thursday was no different. Russell Wilson finished with just 95 yards passing and had 2 interceptions, and Jerry Jeudy continued to make a bad situation worse with both Steve Smith and Mark Schlereth. I really hate to be this negative this early in the weekly recap, but I don't have anything good to say about Denver. For Kansas City, this marked the 16th win in a row over the Broncos, and given how each franchise has went for the past 7 years, that's about right. The Chiefs defense is legit and have given up just 14.7 points per game through 6 games, and they will be a problem for other AFC teams in January, but not necessarily because of Pat Mahomes, but because of their dominating defense. And for the final game in London in 2023, we go across the pond to discuss Ravens-Titans. This was a very Ravens win. The Ravens improved to 4-2 on the year through 6 games. They ran for over 130 yards as a team, and I still don't think the Ravens have played their best game. They had a very, very ugly third quarter, and you could definitely say they could have won this game by 2 or 3 scores. I think their game plan moving forward should be simple. Get Zay and Mark the football and don't overthink it. There was a point in this game where they didn't have Mark Andrews on the field in the red zone for several plays, which is inexcusable. And I don't think the Titans would have won this game, but speaking of inexcusable, their play calling on the goal line was awful at the end of this game. They chose to put the ball in a backup quarterback's hands repeatedly over Derrick Henry, and I do not understand that. Again, I still think Tennessee would have lost, but now that they're 2-4, it's time to shift into something they've been putting off, and that's a rebuild. Now on to the 1 o'clock games, and we go to the Big A to discuss Commanders-Falcons. The Commanders improved to 3-3 in what was a much-needed win after dropping their previous 3 games, including a 40-20 Week 5 loss to the Bears. The Commanders did what teams should do when they play the Falcons, and that's make Desmond Ridder beat them. But for Washington offensively, they weren't on the field a whole lot as Atlanta won the time of possession battle 36-23, but Sam Howell did throw 3 touchdowns and looked a lot better against Atlanta than what he did against Chicago. And for Atlanta, Desmond threw 3 interceptions, and for Atlanta's sake, Arthur Smith wasn't good in this game either, and Falcons fans have been fed up with his clock management and play calling for a while. And for the Falcons, I think there will be both a new head coach and quarterback in the Big A in 2024, and I think that's a change Falcons fans would welcome. I don't think either guy is the long-term answer, and if they had a competent quarterback, you could certainly make an argument that Atlanta would be an NFC contender. And down to Jacksonville for the next game, and it's Colts-Jags. This game went close to what I expected because the Jags' rushing defense is quietly, well, elite. And in this game, Indy ran for just 44 yards on 17 attempts, and the Jags' game plan was simple: force Gardner Minshew to beat you. And there was a point in this game where the Jags were up by 25 points, and their game plan was successful. Yes, Gardner threw for over 300 yards, and Michael Pittman had over 100 yards receiving, but that doesn't always tell the story of the game. For the Jags, their offense didn't play great in this game, but who cares when you win by multiple scores over a division rival? The biggest thing for this team is ensuring Trevor Lawrence is okay, and given they just spent 2 weeks in London, I thought some jet lag was to be expected. They have 2 tough road games in New Orleans and in Pittsburgh in the next 2 games, but the Jags can reasonably be 6-2 through 8 games, and they are positioning themselves to win the AFC South for the 2nd consecutive year. And staying in the Sunshine State, we will go ahead and get the Panthers and Dolphins game out of the way, and this game was very, well, Panthers and Dolphins. The Dolphins offense is a well-oiled machine, and I know people get sick of hearing about the Dolphins, but guys, they spotted the Panthers 14 points in the first quarter, then scored 35 unanswered to make it 35-14 in the fourth quarter, and eventually won 42-21. Tyreek had 163 yards and a touchdown, and Raheem Mostert had 115 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and this became a track meet quick, and the Dolphins do not lose track meets. There's no big takeaways from this game, as this is about what I expected within this game, other than to say the Panthers need to do what they can before the trade deadline to acquire a first-round pick. Their future with Bryce Young and developing him means more than extending Brian Burns at the end of this year. We knew this year wouldn't be great for the Panthers, but it's time. The big takeaway is the Panthers need to get as many picks as they can. It's that simple. Now up to the Windy City to discuss Vikings Bears, and this was a very ugly game. This was a very Big Ten game that resembled Michigan State and Iowa. It was ugly through and through, with the Vikings coming away with a 19-13 win. And it was a lucky win for the Vikings because they are extremely soft up front on both sides of the football. They ran for just 2.1 yards per carry in this game, while Chicago ran for over 160 yards as a team, and undrafted rookie Tyson Bagent nearly led this team to a double-digit comeback win. The Vikings' wins this year are over the Panthers and Bears, and both involve defensive touchdowns. And it was a very sad win for the Vikings, truly, and they play the 49ers next week on Monday night, so that should be a fun game. Primetime Kirk will be out, and the Super Bowl for the Vikings is back on at 2-4. And for Chicago, this passing game is awful. There was a point in this game where Luke Getsy called 3 straight screens, and they weren't developing plays either. They were Tyson Bagent catches the snap and immediately throws the ball, and it was almost disastrous. This game was ugly, but the Bears' offensive line and play calling is abysmal, as in there is truly no quarterback that could succeed in this situation that bad. There's a reason they will have a top 5 pick for the second consecutive year. Down to Houston to talk about Saints-Texans, and this was a very frustrating loss for the Saints after a beatdown in New England in Week 5. And it's extremely frustrating for New Orleans when you have 430 yards of offense and outgain the Texans by over 130 yards in the process and manage just 13 points. And it's not like the Saints don't have talent. Pete Carmichael is their offensive coordinator, and he needs to go. The Saints were 0-3 in the red zone and only put up 13 points in a game where you very easily could have put up 24 or more and walked away from this game with a 4-2 record. Well, that's inexcusable. For Houston, they're now 3-3 heading into their Week 7 bye, and DeMeco Ryans is absolutely getting the most out of the talent he has on this roster. If you would tell anyone in this Texans organization that they shouldn't be 3-3 through 6 games, well, they wouldn't believe you, and that's putting it mildly. Yes, this was an ugly win for Houston, and CJ didn't look like the CJ we've seen at times through the first 6 weeks, but so what? There's going to be growing pains even for him, and it will get better when Tank Dell gets back. We're on to Cincinnati to chat about the Seahawks and Bengals, and the Seahawks have a problem, and it's a common problem, believe it or not, but it's the red zone offense. Losing any game in the NFL sucks, but losing games you can very easily win are the worst. And Seattle had 5 red zone trips in this game and came away with just 10 points. There are far too many weapons on this offense to not walk away with, at minimum, 15 points here, and even that's downplaying what they should do. They had 2 weeks to prepare for this game, and Geno didn't look at all ready when push came to shove at the end of this game. Yes, Seattle has games like the Giants game or the Lions game earlier in the year, but there's almost always a game like this where you can't help but think when watching Seattle, when does the bill come? When are they going to lose this game? And this is how the game went for them. Now for Cincy, Lou Anarumo is one of the best in the business for a reason. Allowing just 13 points to the Seahawks is an incredible accomplishment in itself, and this was a big win and a timely win for the Bengals right before their Week 7 bye. They had their backs against the wall at 1-3 just 2 weeks ago, and they came through, and they are on their way to being back. Now on to the most surprising game of the day, and it's the 49ers and Browns. This type of game is why you can never guarantee wins in the NFL. The 49ers absolutely embarrassed Dallas in Week 5 to the tune of a 42-10 loss, and lost the ensuing week to the Browns with a backup quarterback. There was a lot going against the 49ers in this game, such as injuries, weather, and everything else, but they'll have a get-right game against the Vikings in Week 7. If you think I'm going to say they're done now or anything crazy because of this loss, Well, that's not the goal of the weekly recaps. The goal isn't to have an extreme overreaction every Sunday. They'll be fine and every team has a loss like this. But for Cleveland, this is an absolutely huge win, and I know that's stating the obvious, but they're 3-2 on the year with an elite defense and play the Colts and Cardinals in 2 of their next 3 games, teams that had top 5 picks this past year, and it's not unreasonable to think they can be 5-3 through 8 games and maybe make a trade to prepare them for a playoff push. And I did a video on that will be linked at the end earlier this week, but Cleveland is a sneaky team in the AFC. Out to Sin City we go to talk about Belichick versus McDaniels. The Raiders won with the score of 21-17, and the Raiders did not score 21 points in the traditional sense. They had 4 field goals, a touchdown, and a safety, and this, like the Vikings and Bears game earlier in the day, was a very ugly game. And for the Patriots, this isn't anything new. This roster isn't good, and the Patriots are genuinely a bottom 5 to 10 team. They are outdated, and this is not a team that's anywhere close to competing in 2023. The best way to describe the Patriots is they're a team constructed to win in the 2010s trying to play now, and it doesn't work. And sure, the Raiders won and good for them, but they still have their fair share of problems in their own right. They had 7 red zone trips and had 1 touchdown. They play in Chicago next week and could be 4-3, and good for them. But does it matter? Are they going anywhere? No. All of Raider Nation still wants their head coach fired. A win is a win, but there's no big takeaway here with the Raiders. They just stink less than the Patriots. Using Interstate 15, we are headed to SoFi to discuss Cardinals Rams. The Cardinals are now 1-5 on the year, and there was a point in this game where the Rams basically realized that they didn't need McVay to be in his bag and to craft an offensive play he'll use once a year, and more or less we can run the ball right at them and basically say, stop us. This is the 3rd straight double-digit loss for the Cardinals, and they're a rebuilding team. Losses are going to happen. Unfortunately, their next 3 games are in Seattle, home against Baltimore, and in Cleveland, so they're probably going to be 1-8, though they usually do give Seattle trouble. But again, this is a rebuilding team. They're a AAA baseball team in the MLB. The Rams have arguably the game of their season next week in terms of what they'll do this year, because the difference between 3-4 and 4-3 is massive, and the Rams can compete with anybody. Back east to Tampa to talk Lions-Bucks, and this was the Lions controlling this game from the start. Detroit outgained them by nearly 130 yards, they held the ball for over 36 minutes, they were 9 of 16 on 3rd down, and they won the turnover battle. Oh, and the 49ers and Eagles both lost, so this was the best day Detroit could have asked for. Oh, and 2022 first-round pick Jameson Williams had a big play touchdown and stretched the field the way they intended him to when they drafted him. With all of the focus entering the week on the undefeated Eagles and 49ers, the Lions were a tad underrated, but they're here, and they are serious contenders in the NFC. For Tampa, their lack of a run game is a problem and will continue to be a problem. They'll beat a lot of teams this year because of their defense and win with their offense basically not losing games, but when they play teams like this will be the result. Tampa may very well win the NFC South, and hell, they may win a playoff game, but they are at maximum a division round exit. And to MetLife to discuss Eagles-Jets, and the Eagles are done. They stink. Now, and all jokes aside, the Eagles had been flirting with losing a game throughout the first 5 weeks, and it finally happened. And I know Eagles fans are not looking forward to Week 7 against the Dolphins, especially after this game, but they will be fine. They're not going to commit 4 turnovers every game, and they're going to clean it up. Even in the scenario they lose next week, I still think they're going to be fine because this team has a lot of talent, and I am always an advocate for a humbling loss. I know Eagles fans are hot about this game, especially losing to the Jets, as it's a quick trip up the Jersey Turnpike, but they can have this one because Philly's eyes at the moment are on a much bigger prize. For the Jets, they're 3-3 heading into the bye. Aaron Rodgers is ahead of schedule. They play the Giants and Raiders in 2 of their 3 games off the bye. If you're a Jets fan, well, as I hear Jets fans say, jet the expletive up. The season for the boys in green could just be getting started. Please check the pinned comment if you're interested in helping the channel and potentially earning yourself some cheddar, as that's all I have, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 25% of people watching are subscribed, and it makes a big difference. We are closing in on 100K, and I truly cannot thank you guys enough for the support. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.